Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again with another Film Fanatic show. So yeah, I'm really excited. I'm going to see the new Dune Part 2 tonight. And so stay tuned for a there'll be a review probably within the next couple days. I won't be able to do it tomorrow, but it will be coming up pretty soon. But for good or bad, which, I think it's probably going to be pretty good, but we'll see. I will do a review. I definitely that's one thing that I do that's a little bit different is I don't tend to post reviews for movies that I don't like. Sometimes I do, but generally I have always been in the mindset of just movies that I really love, movies that I'm just really enthusiastic about, and especially most of the shows, probably about 95, 96% of the videos that I post on this channel are all movies that I actually own. So, it's the case of where, there'll be movies that I will, watch or revisit, numerous times, have, different experiences around them, watch them at different, when I say go back to like DVDs that I have when I was getting into collecting, it's a different experience watching them, from watching them then to watching them now. I might have them on Blu-ray or what have you. So it's always a great, interesting experience how a movie can kind of change, like how you change. Hopefully you grow a little bit or you're in a different emotional space, and a movie can have a different impact or mean something differently to you for your experience through your experience. And so, but I typically, that's how I tackle videos. I don't usually do videos on movies that I want to just trash or that I don't like. I generally focus on movies that I love. But I think what I do is kind of part of the whole, it's definitely a part of the idea of being a movie critic. So I think criticism is really important. I think it's a vital thing, especially if a person can do it in a way of where it's pretty respectful or in a relatively intelligent manner. So but I think that's a really important thing. So I do do I have done shows of where I will do those kinds of things. One example of that was I did a big show on Ridley Scott's Prometheus, and I have some things. There's some things about that movie that I like, and there's some things that I don't know. It's a weird thing. It's one of those movies that I really wanted to like because I was really excited when that movie came out, and I really wanted to kind of like it in a weird way. The same thing happened when Phantom Menace came out, which was going to be the first prequel of the Star Wars universe. So that was a movie I was anticipating like beyond belief, and also Prometheus. So excited because I'm such a huge fan of some of those movies in that franchise, especially the first two or three. So I was, living with so much anticipation. So I kind of went in thinking, okay, this is going to be good. This is going to be good. And sometimes that happens when it's actually, in reality, if you look at it objectively, it's kind of a horrible situation, and it's not a good experience at all. And so, I did a big show on Prometheus, and there's a lot of I really don't like that movie very much. And every time I have seen it, and I've seen it a lot of times, because again, there are qualities, there are certain things about that movie that I've always liked, and I thought it was kind of interesting, but then the problems that I had with the movie always outweighed the things I actually liked about it. It was a very mixed thing. But I've seen it and I've tried giving it a chance since then. When I first saw it, I saw it in the theater, and now I don't know, I can't even get through that movie at all. Like I can't. Yeah, it almost, I don't know, it almost makes me angry. So yeah, But anyway, I did a show on Prometheus and how that movie, if it kind of affected me as far as like around the idea of going into a movie that you're really anticipating and being a fan of the franchise and being a fan of Ridley Scott, all those things. And and I was pretty critical of the movie. I was, I kind of laid out my whole idea or ideas around why I think that movie was kind of kind of a catastrophe in a lot of ways. And I was amazed by the amount of people that commented on that video. Like it was crazy. I had, there was one day where every day I was getting all these new comments, and then one day I spent probably 3 hours, which never usually happens for me. I spent about 2 or 3 hours just responding to the, the different comments that were coming in, and it was great. I mean, that's what I wanted. But there were some people that really, again, really had some good things to say and very negative things to say about the movie. But that's what it's all about. But generally, I don't do shows on movies that I don't really like. But I think it's an important thing to do. I think it is to try to articulate why you feel, personally, why you feel something doesn't work. I think it's a good, healthy thing to be able to kind of formalize, laying out maybe case by case, or in a kind of a formalized, methodical way of why you feel like it's not connecting the dots. I think it's important to do. But anyway, the other thing that I always do with the show, which is kind of the exception, is I always do whenever I go to a movie and whenever I go to the actual movie theater. Whether I've liked the movie or not, I always do a review for that film because it's just been kind of a natural thing. So I have done quite a bit of shows on my experience going to the movie theater at a particular time and talking about that movie. Generally, it's been mostly pretty good, but it's been kind of dismal in regards to going to the movies because the last time I went was to go see Godzilla -1, and that was like, Jesus, at least 2 or 3 months ago. So it's been a while, and that movie was just incredible. But so now when I go, it's like it's even more exciting because I don't go as much because I just feel like there's less and less choices of exciting things to see. I know this year there are some good movies coming out that I really am excited to see, but we will see. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. So, but I am really, really excited to see Dune 2. It's a really, I don't know, the whole Dune world is incredibly important to me. So, I did a big show on Dune, kind of the Dune universe, my history with it. I talked about the books, Frank Herbert, the author. I talked about the movies, and all things Dune, the TV shows. So check it out if you get a chance. So today is kind of another, kind of a specialty show, but one thing that I've done, one thing that I have done in the past on this show is I'll talk about, there will be certain movies that I have done, say, multiple shows on. Like for example, two movies that I can think of that I've done multiple shows on are, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I've done probably 3 or 4 shows on that. A movie that is just one of my all-time favorites. And another movie I did, another show that I've done, or another movie where I've covered it multiple times is Tourist Trap. Probably my favorite horror exploitation movie of all time. So certain movies, are things that again are just I really really enjoy, or it could be something I've seen for the first time, and I start watching it, and I get a different experience, or I find myself being pulled into it more and more. There was another movie that I've done. I think I've done at least 2 shows on, and it was a new movie that I discovered, and it was this British sci-fi horror movie called Prey, and and it's just amazing. And that's a movie that I've seen multiple times, and I have done some shows on it. So today's show is going to be playing in with that whole kind of presentation or theme. And that movie, and I did a show on this movie probably about a year and a half ago, kind of when I started doing the YouTube thing, and that is Love Brides of the Blood Mummy. And I watched this again. I've only seen this movie. I'd only seen it one other time before. I did a show on this movie right after I bought this, and I really liked this movie a lot. I thought it was just completely bonkers, crazy, and bizarre. And then the other night I watched it, and it was like literally, yeah, it's like the second time I've seen it. And I have to say, this movie, and it's crazy because this movie came out in 1973. It's just it's just crazy. It's a Spanish film, and when I think that this film came out in '73, it's just bonkers crazy. And I have to really say, I have to say that at the end of the day, Love Brides of the Blood Mummy might be one of the most bizarre movies I've ever seen. I mean, it's completely bonkers, like completely nuts. And I felt that, you know, I don't know, it even resonated with me more this time. Um, it was directed by Ken Ruder, and it's a Spanish slash French 1973 release. It came out, and it's all in Spanish, and it has, or actually, yeah, it's in Spanish and some French, which is unusual, with English subtitles. And this movie is just bonkers crazy because the premise of this movie is about this scientist who is also an archaeologist. He comes across he they discover a mummy, and then the scientist has this crazy idea of trying to basically bring back this mummy. And the mummy comes back and is essentially lives off the blood of women. And he is it's kind of a vampire movie also. And there's all of these scenes of where he like also is into apparently he's very much into S&M and bondage, and there's all these scenes of where he is like whipping women with a tied to a wall or chained to a wall like an animal, and he's whipping him with this whip, and it's just crazy. Like it's totally bizarre. And this movie came out. I mean, again, it's '73, and it's like, how the hell? How does this stuff even exist? I love it. I love it that this movie even exists, and that it gets this kind of treatment. I mean, the Blu-ray. There's no special features on here, which is a little bit of a bummer, but still, it's so damn entertaining, and it's kind of baffling on how bizarre this movie is. I think it's one of the most bizarre movies I've ever seen. And it's kind of like a softcore porn. It's like it is gory and it is graphic and it's pretty dirty and raunchy, but a lot of the time they don't a lot of the times they don't actually kind of show you the sexual acts. A lot of the things or a lot of the situations things are kind of implied, even though there are moments of where it is gory and over the top and all those kinds of things, but it's it's just wild. But I almost feel like it makes it even more it makes for even a stranger experience, because you don't necessarily see full on penetration or whatnot. And like I said, this movie is it's a Spanish movie, and you have the option to watch it in its native language with English subtitles. And so it's very cool. The music for this movie is actually really, really good. It's a very, I don't know. The music is very evocative, and it's kind of a gothic. It has a very kind of gothic aesthetic to it. The cinematography for this movie is actually gorgeous. There's all of these big wide shots in the these big giant kind of wilderness landscapes. It's actually, even though this movie is so trashy and so, I don't know, technically awful, because there's the editing is really weird too, like where they're, you know where there's like a scene of where the mummy is basically killing this woman, and he's draining her blood, and then it like cuts forward to where suddenly he is like, you know being attacked and being, where now he is, people are now aware that this mummy exists, and they are, actively trying to go after him and kill him and destroy him. So it has these like weird sequences over where it doesn't make any sense, and it's very disorienting, and it's kind of shitty as far as the editing goes, and it's kind of out of sequence. Like that happens at times during the movie, but again, I think it's one of those, it's one of those weird examples of where, because it's so badly done from a technical standpoint, and it's, it doesn't make all that much sense. And but I think it, in this context, because this movie is just so bizarre, it kind of works. It's like on paper it shouldn't work, but it does actually work because, just just how how outrageous this movie is. And so in that context, it's great. And the other thing that's super cool about this is my favorite label, and I've been really bummed I have not gotten any new movies from this label. I haven't been able to find any. They have a big online presence, big online store, but I don't. I like to, I have tons of their titles, but I haven't bought any in a super long time. I never noticed them out anymore, and that is Mondo Macabra. You can see the label right there, and Mondo Macabra is my favorite label. They are just incredible. Like they take, as far as from what I have learned about them and the way I discovered them, which was probably about 2 or 3 years ago, I came across a series of these films that just looked so bizarre and outrageous, and I rented, or actually I bought them, and they were just amazing, and I was blown away. And then I dove deeper into their catalog, and at that time, at Bull Moose, when I would go, I was always going to the Bull Moose in Waterville. They had a ton of Mondo Macabre label movies there. I mean, I discovered I have probably about 15 to 20 Mondo Macabre movies now, give or take. I might have more than that, I think, but they at one point had tons of their movies. And Mondo Macabre, the thing that they do, which I think is unique, is they specialize mainly in European films, mainly in they have tons of films in from that come out of Asia. They have lots of Filipino movies. They have tons of Japanese movies, and again, all throughout Europe, like lots of Spanish films like this. And they, their whole thing is all about, the hardcore, you know, envelope pushing kind of exploitation thing. And so they, out of all of the boutique labels that kind of exist that I've come across, again, I've talked about them extensively. You have Blue Underground, Severin, Synapse, which was, I believe Synapse was like the first company that really started to, move into the world of distributing and reissuing these exploitation movies. There's Arrow. Arrow's another one that's fairly big. And they're all like fantastic, and they all have, and I have most of the movies that I own are, from those various labels. I really also love Blue Underground. Blue Underground's probably my second favorite. But the thing that's different about Mono Macabre is I find that they take even a deeper dive in just, pure obscurity. The shit that they have is just like, there's been times of every movie I've gotten from their label I've never seen before. I've literally bought them cold, came across them, and this is, a primetime example of that, where it just looked so bizarre and fascinating and just crazy that I'm like, okay, I need to buy this, and the other thing is their prices are just amazing. Typically, too, like this Love Brides of the Blood Mummy does not, unfortunately, it does not have any special features. It has a cool thing, which I haven't really watched, but it has a cool thing of like a collection of all of these old school films from the '70s, like film trailers, which is part of the fun and the joy of loving exploitation movies because it was all about the trailers, the artwork, and so there's a ton of trailers, but there's no special features in regards to this movie itself. But pretty much every other title that I own that is of the Mondo Macabre company, or from the Mondo Macabre, one of their movies, they typically have tons of special features. You have at least a couple hours, and it's wild because again, these movies are so freaking obscure and so underground, and you're just like, wow, I can't believe this movie is getting this kind of treatment. Like, it's crazy. They also do 4K, I believe. I don't have a 4K player, so I don't really have a desire to get a 4K player. I've seen 4K, and it's pretty amazing, and I know Mono Cabra has moved into putting out more titles in 4K. Sometimes I think it's a significant difference, with quality, but I think overall it's not really that much of a different experience. If you get a really good Blu-ray of a good movie, like for example, like say I was thinking about it this morning, Lucio Fulci's The New York Ripper. I have that on Blu-ray, and it's one of my favorite movies of all time. And I saw a guy talk about that online on the YouTube channel, where is 4K, is it worth that investment? And he was saying, this guy was basically saying it's really, certain films will really really shine when you see it on 4K. And I've seen 4K before, and it is pretty astounding. But like, I saw Sam Raimi's Spider-Man on 4K, and it's kind of jaw-dropping, and I did notice a big difference. But from what I hear, they are expensive, but again, they will come down in price because of how the weird the market is, just like everything else. So, but that means that you have to like buy now, like if I got a 4K player and I wanted to get the Texas Chainsaw Massacre on 4K, that would mean I would have now my sixth or seventh copy of that movie. And it's like, okay, how many copies, how many editions, even though I love the movie to death, how many editions of that same movie can I buy? And I'm pretty happy with the editions that I have. I mean, I even have a VHS copy of it. So, it's ridiculous. But this guy was saying that it's not really overall, there isn't that much of a difference for the most part. There are certain films that will pop, but so it's not necessarily worth that investment. But I'm super happy with this because you have this movie that it's the original negative from the film, and it's transferred into Blu-ray, and it's amazing. Like, it's amazing. So everything is remastered. The sound, and considering that this movie was like shot for, I don't know, $10, it's just like. And it's so obscure. Like, no one knows this fucking movie. Who the hell knows? Who knows about this movie or any of these movies? But yet there's enough weirdos, well, I guess like me, out there who love this shit that support a company like this. And I just think that is just so damn cool. And And, I think one of the things that happens with a lot of these companies, and I've seen that time and time again, is you have these directors and filmmakers and, actors in all of these really, obscure movies that have been totally forgotten about. Because of all these reissues, they have gotten this like second life. A lot of these movies have become, cult phenomenons. A lot of people buy them. People will spend $25, $30 for it on Blu-ray or 4K. They'll buy multiple editions of some of these movies. They'll buy the 40th anniversary, say, of a movie or whatever it is. And there's this the people that are into it, it's a smaller group, but the people that are into it are willing to spend that money and willing to go there, like myself. And it's definitely been enough, or a sizable market, that these companies do exist and that there is an audience. And I've seen that in lots of interviews and, watching special features with a lot of these different directors in these films, where, in hindsight, they made these movies, or were involved with these series of these like super low budget, exploitation movies, and they were like, okay, we had this, maybe, they had their quick theatrical run, they made a little bit of money, and they just got shelved, and, and then they just, went into complete and utter obscurity and disappeared off the face of the earth. And then that was it. It was like the chapter was closed. But now all of these companies have emerged. Mondo Macabre being the one that specializes in taking that deeper, extra deep dive, bring these movies back. And a lot of these directors have said that suddenly they're like, they get fan mail. They get all these emails. They get people reaching out to them about, how that movie was made, and how much that movie means to that particular person. And a lot of these guys and girls have like been asked to be guests in at all of these, crazy horror conventions around the world. And suddenly they're actually making a little bit of money off of these movies that have been reissued, and it's like they have this second life. And there's been some exploitation movies and some like super low budget movies that where it's kind of gone on to where it's become like a phenomenon of where, one of the biggest stories around that would be a movie like My Bloody Valentine. Like that was, I think, relatively successful, but it wasn't until like the Blu-ray edition of that became available, or the DVD version. And over the years, that movie has just grown to where it's like huge, huge. And another movie, which is one of the best slasher movies ever, Mad Men, total obscurity. Like it came out and died, and then might have hit a few theaters, had some success, and then it went into total obscurity. And now 20, 30 years later, in that world, it's kind of regarded as one of the best slasher movies. And now that movie is making money, and they're the cast and crew for that film in particular, they get invited to all of these conventions, and they're actually able to make a lot more money, because at that time, it was a passion project. They didn't get a chance to really make any money. Some slasher films were actually, huge when they came out, and actually were very successful. Like case in point, Herschel Gordon Lewis, when he directed and released Blood Feast. Like that movie was kind of a phenomenon. Like that was a huge movie for him, and that like established his career. That movie was so big that every movie that he put out after that, he always measured it on, say, from the success standpoint. Well, it was almost as successful as Blood Feast, or it just quite wasn't, because that movie for him was a huge hit, and that put his name, in the world. So it's really interesting, the phenomenon around these totally bizarre movies, how they get the second life, and the most obscure thing that you can find. And they're, again, I every movie I've bought from Mondo Macabre, I have never seen before. I have totally bought them cold. Their prices are always fantastic. Like I don't know, 15, $16 at the most, that I've paid for maybe a Mondo Macabre. And again, they usually come with tons of special features. The quality is immaculate. So, and every one I've bought, I've loved. I There hasn't been one movie or one title of theirs that I thought was a clunker. So, and again, I just watched Love Rides of the Blood Mummy the other night, and I enjoyed it. I love this movie even more the second time. And I think that this is a movie that's gonna, over time, with future viewings, I'm just gonna probably fall in love with this movie more and more, because this movie is just so utterly ridiculous and crazy and fun. So yeah, I highly recommend this. This is like the second show uh, where I've talked about this movie, and there'll probably be another one at some point. But I can't recommend this movie enough. It is something to be experienced. It's unlike anything I've ever really seen before. Definitely, I would have to say this is up there with being one of the most bizarre movies I think I've ever seen. But entertaining as all hell. So thanks again. This is Jason Dean, and we will see you next time. Peace.